Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Read and Talk About Gemology. I think we're going to have a great show tonight. We've had probably more people register for this one than we've had in a long while, which is exciting for us. So thanks all you guys for hanging out with us for another month of talking about, the thing that we love, which is gems, jewelry, gemology, and, everything in between. My name is Justin K. Prim, and I'm going to be one of your hosts tonight, along with our special guest, Antoinette Matlins. But before we bring her in, I will bring in Vincent, and we will get a little backstory about Antoinette and how we were able to get her here tonight. Hi, Vincent.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
How's it going on your side of town?
Well, no, so far so good. I recover from experiencing some chili yesterday, so it was an interesting experience. Carolina Reaper, that's took me
That's
4 hours to get quiet and think a bit about something else that I want to have some yogurt. So yeah, no, it's fine. I survived.
so tonight we're talking with Antoinette Matlins. We've talked or we've heard from her many times because she's been one of our favorite reoccurring visitors in the chat room in many of our talks, and tonight we are talking directly with her and getting her story. So what's your relationship? How did we get to this point where we wanted to?
Well, well, it started about exactly 20 years ago in early November 2000. I wanted to go to study gemology, and in order to do that, long story to make short, I wanted to study gemology in Myanmar, in Yangon. So I had an opportunity to go to study there, but the people who organized my study there told me that in Myanmar at this time there was basically no book, no internet. So I had to come with everything I would need, and the studies will take 4 months. So in order to go there, I decided to I was advised to go to buy some tools, and also I was told to get some books in order to be able to study correctly. So when I went to get the tools, I went at GIA school in Bangkok. I was
Hmm.
told that they were selling some books there, and actually I found two books that I didn't had. I had already Ruby and Sapphire by Richard Hughes on the Guide of Gemstone of the World by Walter Schumann,
Hmm.
and I was advised to get a book called Gem Identification Made Easy about how to use pocket tools when you go in the field or when you go in a trade show, and also because I will. People told me that the main tool in order to identify gemstone was actually the microscope. He advised me to buy a book about inclusion, and that was the Photo Atlas of Inclusion.
Oh,
So, yeah, by John Coivola. So, in order to, as this is exactly 20 years that I started my gemology study in Burma, I had the idea to invite for this talk about gemology the different authors from these books that really helped me during my studies. And actually, Ruby and Sapphire, it's a very interesting book about Ruby and Sapphire, but it doesn't speak too much about other stones. In the photo atlas, you had a lot of inclusion photograph about many stones, but it doesn't really tell you about how to identify them. So the book that was really helpful to me at the beginning of my studies, because I was not yet a gemologist, I was just starting my studies, was Gem Identification Made Easy, because it provided me a kind of guideline about how to use efficiently pocket instrument, even
mhm.
if I was not yet, a qualified gemologist. So, and I get very fond of many instruments described in that book, especially the Darkfield Loop, and that book became my main companion for during all my studies during 4 months, and it was just perfect because actually it just tell you how few instruments uh, can be useful to solve maybe 95 or 98% of the problem you will meet when you go to a gem market or when you go to a trade show in a different place. And then at one point, it tells you, well, at that point, you need to find somebody more qualified, or you need to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that was great. That was really, really super helpful. So that book was my companion for many years. And 3 years ago, I was on giving a talk about gemology, about sapphires in Scotland. And when I look at the list of the other speakers, that was a name that I knew, and that was Antoinette Matlins. So she was there, and she was getting ready to speak about something. So I went to see her, and I say that I thank her because actually she was my book mother. You know, I say that Richelieu is my book father because it's because of his books that I went to gemology, but it's because of this book, Gem Identification Made Easy, that I started, you know, to look at stone and to try to identify them. And actually, when you find out something about a stone and you are able to identify a stone just based on few instruments, you start to love them more, to be even more interested about them.
Mm.
So it's really a book that developed my passion and my love for gemstone, and especially about, you know, going in the field and you know, trying to find out which kind of stone the people are mining.
I see.
So
So
yeah, it's a
a
special book.
handy guide, a handy book. So shall we bring her in and get her side of the story?
Yep, sure.
Okay, so Antoinette, if you're ready, you can unmute and start your video and join us.
Hello, I
Welcome.
hope you can see me and hear me.
We can see you.
Yeah,
We can hear you.
we were a little bit afraid like 15 minutes ago when we were wondering if maybe we'll have a webinar with speaking with each other.
I tell you, I'm listening to you, and all I can think of is that gemological conference in Scotland. And I look down, and somebody said, Antoinette Matlins, and I look up, and there's this person I don't know. He said, I love your book, Gem Identification Made Easy. I said, oh, well, thank you very much. And he said, my name is Vincent Pardieu. And I thought, oh, Vincent Pardieu. Of course I know who you are. I was so amazed, number one, that I was meeting you and that you had told me how important my book had been to you. So it was like bonding, instant bonding with Vincent.
Actually, the reason why I never wrote a book or even an article about which kind of tool I use in the field, because every time somebody asks me, I say, well, you know, I don't need to write anything. There is a book that is very good, Gem Identification Made Easy by Antoinette Matlins. There is everything there. Why should I repeat what is written there? You can get the book for $20 or $30, I think.
Yeah,
That's the price I
somewhere,
paid for the book.
depending upon where you are.
No, but that's the price I paid.
Yeah.
And why should I spend 2 or 3 weekends to rewrite what you have already written?
Well, because your story is going to be much more interesting. You're going to tell us the inside story of being in the field. That's what I want to read about.
No, well,
And
that's different, but it's not people. Oh, which kind of instrument are you taking in the field? Well, I take the one from Gem Identification Made Easy.
well,
No need
I
for that.
love to hear these things, of course, Vincent, because I think I mentioned to you, you asked me if if I like to write. And I think you were a little surprised when I told you I hate to write. I have never loved writing, and I never expected to write a book. For me, well, first, I should back up a little. I was just simply born lucky. My dad was Antonio Bonanno. They called him Tony Bonanno, in whose honor the wonderful accredited gemologist associations award the Antonio Bonanno Award for Excellence in Gemology. That was for in honor of my dad. He
You
was
got it.
had a strong background in chemistry and in physics.
Mhm.
And he, as a little boy, just developed this passion for gems that grew and grew and grew. And eventually he started a school of gemology on the East Coast. And then he taught lapidary. And I just tagged along, and I went on the gold panning trips with him in Maryland and Virginia, and tourmaline prospecting in Maine, and looking for rubies in North Carolina, and emeralds too. It for me, it was a hobby, and it was a great fun. And of course, every science project that in the American school system, when you get into like junior high school or middle school, they call it in some places, in high school, you have to take science, and you have to do science projects. So my projects were in junior high school. I learned how to build a dichroscope, one of your favorite tools. And all the, and I did another on crystallography and so on and so forth. I mean, I never ever had my father's knowledge. I still don't have my father's knowledge. I will never have my father's knowledge. But one of the things I discovered in the 1970s, and Dad also had a gem testing laboratory in the Washington, D.C. area. And there were these diamond investment schemes. They were being promoted in very well-known and respected publications like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the LA Times, and magazines like Fortune magazine and Business Week. I mean, diamonds. And I commented to my husband, they are going to lose their shirts. And he said, why would you say that? I said, because they may understand on a superficial level this thing called the 4 C's, but they don't understand what they really mean. And furthermore, the week before I had this conversation with my husband, a friend in the company at which I was working, and by the way, gemology for me, for the first half of my life practically, was just a hobby. But people knew that I knew about the subject, and they'd bring me things at the office. And this one very smart young man brings me the first diamond he had purchased as part of this diamond investment scheme that he bought. He believed every word he read, okay, because of where he read it. And it's a little diamond in a sealed container. You could see the diamond through the plastic top, and it had all these documents and certificates. And it said, if the seal is broken on the container, in other words, if you open the container, all of the guarantees and warranties are void, invalid, broken. And he said, so will you tell me what it is? I said, well, I can't tell you looking through this plastic lucite container what it is. Well, I can't open it. If I open it, then I lose my investment. I said, if you don't open it, you lose your investment. Because if you don't open it, you don't know what's inside. Most people then did not understand that with the eye alone, particularly looking through plastic or something, you can't know what you have. So I said, you have to open it. Then you'll know whether you want to buy the second one. We opened it, and it was cubic zirconia.
Wow.
Right? So his mouth dropped open, and I'm telling my husband, and the proof of investors losing their shirts is the fact that this young man, who was smart, was totally deceived. And he said, well, people who have the kind of money, and this was, you might remember in the 70s, at one point, a 1 carat D flawless diamond was bringing $600,000 at wholesale, right? Haven't seen those prices, and we'll never see them in my lifetime, I don't think, but it was staggering. And I said, they'll lose their shirts. And my father said, well, if they're going to put that kind of money into such an investment, they'll read up on it. They'll find out what they need to know. And I said, the problem with that is, unless you have a degree in physics or chemistry, and ideally both, there's nothing written that the consumer can buy and understand. And my
Mm.
husband looked at me and said, "So why don't you write the book that's missing?" And I looked at him and I said, "Me? Write a book?" He said, "Why not?" I said, "I'm not a writer." He said, "Do you write business proposals at the office?" I said, "Yes, that's different." He said, "What's different?" I said, "It's a business proposal. It's a couple of pages." He said, "Don't think about the book. Think about what you want to say. And say what you want to say. And gradually the pages will build up and you'll finish what you want to say on the topic." And the way he said it sounded rather simple. So I started with an outline.
Mhm.
And then I called my father and I said to him, "Dad, you and I are going to write this book." And he said the words that destroyed my life forever. He said, "You can't write a book for the consumer. It's much too complicated scientifically." I said, "Dad, how can you say that?" He said, "Because it's true." I said, "Did I or didn't I understand it when I was in elementary school, junior high school, and high school? And you're telling me an adult, possibly one with a very fine education, can't comprehend it in a book that we could write? That's ridiculous." He said, "I'm telling you, you can't write the book." I said, "Okay, I'll write the book. And you'll review it chapter by chapter." And that's how we started the first book. I just sat down, I made my little outline with the experiences I already had and the things I had seen from my father's office and the dinner conversation. I started writing. The first chapter was on judging what did quality mean. Well, actually, the first chapter was on what's involved in determining the quality and value of any gemstone. I talked about the four C's a little more in depth. Then I got into diamonds, and then I got into colored gemstones, and then I got into pearls. And here's a chapter on questions you should ask, a chapter on what should be in writing on your sales receipt, and where and how to verify that what you've been told and what's in writing is in fact true. And all of a sudden, I had a book.
Mhm.
And it was a very interesting experience to put it all down. And I would just work a couple of hours each evening after I came home from the office. And it took several months, but it was, I'll never forget feeling when I wrote the last chapter. And one of my associates at the advertising agency at which I was working at the time was reading each chapter
Mhm.
and just making sure it was clear. I asked him if he would do it. The same one who bought the diamond that wasn't. Okay. And and he would read each chapter and he'd come in and he'd say, "That was really interesting." And he got it. And so it started. Then I was invited to Tucson to give some lectures as part of the AGTA show. And it was more about, in general, quality factors and so on and so forth. But Dad was coming with me at the time. And I said, "You know what we need to do, Dad? You always told me that if you had to rely on desktop instruments only, there were many things you could do, but there
Mhm.
were many things you can't do, as in the field or at a gem show. You're going to carry a microscope with you around the show? What are you going to do?" Dad never left the house without three little tools in his shirt pocket: a loop, a Chelsea filter. This was actually Dad's. It has his initials etched into the back of it. A little Chelsea filter, his calcite microscope, his loop. With
Mhm.
those three tools and nothing else except knowing how to use them properly, he could identify back then roughly 85% of what he saw at any show. It was amazing. Now we've had to add, I used to carry just this. Everything I needed was in my little pouch. Well, as more things come into the market, I had to add a Darkfield Loop. And then, of course, I had to have the mag light on which it fits. And then at some point, I also added a synthetic emerald filter, which is basically a chromium filter at the time, used primarily to separate flux-grown synthetic emeralds from natural emeralds. And then gradually that expanded. And then I found, particularly when synthetic diamonds entered the market, I couldn't leave home without my little portable long wave, short wave UV lamp. And I confess, I've moved up to a pouch this size now. You know, if you get those airplane bags, if you fly in business class, they give you one perfect size to put everything you need. Your loop, your Chelsea filter, your dichroscope. I never leave home without those three. I've added the Darkfield Loop because it's so fabulous. And I have added a type spotter for diamonds to know if I have a type 1 or a type 2, but I also need my UV lamp in order to know, because I need the shortwave ultraviolet. And here I am in Portugal. I did not know at the time that we would be doing this, Vincent. And I have all of the stuff I possibly could need for any gem I was looking at. That led to a new series of workshops in Tucson. And it started out as a 3-hour workshop. It never ended in under 4. Some people even stayed for 5.
Right. No surprise.
You know,
when you play with the tool, people have their stone, they want to check again.
Exactly. And I would bring my box of stones. We would pass out stones, pass out instruments, divide the group into groups of 4 or 5 or 6, depending upon how many people, put a set of instruments on each table so you could learn how to use them properly. I was stunned. Some gemologists took the class because they said, come on, Antoinette, why do you carry a Chelsea filter? You know, nobody, no gemologist uses those anymore. I said, you know, that's a really big mistake. Oh, come on. I said, no, really. If you're looking at colored stones and you're looking at parcels or you're looking at a large number, first thing I do, usually at a show, there's plenty of light, incandescent light coming down on, but if not, I have my incandescent light with me. I put it on the stone. I hold the filter to my eye. And if they're all blue sapphires, for example, whatever I'm seeing through here, which should be essentially just a dark colored stone, should all be that same color. So if I'm looking and all of a sudden one of those blue sapphires goes red because it's not a blue sapphire, it's a synthetic blue Spinel mixed in with the parcel to quickly increase the weight of the parcel. I said, oh, and I said, it's fabulous for Paraiba tourmalines. And the guys looked at me and said, what do you mean Paraiba tourmalines? The Paraiba tourmaline doesn't go red through the Chelsea filter. I said, it's not about going red. That's the biggest mistake people make. It's about what you see. Now, if you have a single stone, you need to know what it's supposed to show. But if you're looking at a parcel, I was at a major gem show looking at a dealer's exhibition of chrome tourmaline. Okay? We know chrome tourmaline is much more expensive than Verdolite, right? He also had some Paraiba tourmalines. And the first thing I do is pull out my Chelsea filter. And the guy looks at me and he said, you can just keep walking. I said, excuse me? He said, you can just keep walking. You obviously don't know what you're doing. Nobody uses a Chelsea filter for tourmaline. This is tourmaline, lady, not emeralds. I said, I know it's tourmaline. I can read. It says chrome tourmaline. And I said, well, actually, they're not all chrome tourmaline. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, 2 in that tray aren't. What do you mean? I said, all chrome tourmaline will go red through the Chelsea filter due to the chromium in it. And those 2 don't. All the others do, but those 2 don't. And then I walked down to the Paraiba tourmaline tray, and he had 6 Paraibas, approximately a carat each. They look beautiful.
Mm.
And I went like this, and I said, what's the price per carat on these? And this was a long time ago. They were $1,000 a carat. Wish I'd bought a whole bunch more, not from him, but okay. So I look through my Chelsea filter. I saw 3 reactions. 1 went red. I knew that was a fake. I didn't know what fake it was, but I knew it was not Paraiba. Then 2 were the same color through the filter, greenish. And then there was 1 that didn't go red or pink, but it was a totally different shade of greenish. It had much more grayish to the green, totally different. And I kept going like it. We took them all out. I pulled out my portable refractometer. The one that was grayish greenish, as opposed to the more greenish of the 2 that were Paraibas, was apatite. So the Chelsea filter alone did not tell me what I had. It told me what I didn't have. I knew that all of those stones were not Paraiba tourmalines. And not only was a single one mixed, there was apatite, there was synthetic corundum in a Paraiba color, there was a piece of glass, and there were Paraiba tourmalines, all in this man's display case. And I said, if you had just used your Chelsea filter when you were buying, you might have discovered that something wasn't right. That's why this is so useful. And he looked at me, and I give him credit for this. He said, I had no idea. I owe you an apology. Pick whichever stone you want. I'm giving it to you as a gift. And I said, but you can be sure I'm not going to pick one of the imitations. And we laughed, and we became friends. But I was in Tucson last year. And many people watching, I know, go to Tucson. And I went out along the strip to one of the other shows, not the AGTA show and not the GJX show, but another smaller show. And there was a ruby dealer selling rough. He had like a huge barrel of rough ruby, all sizes, all shades of color, and a price per kilo. He was selling by the kilo. So I took my Chelsea filter. The sun was shining down intensely on the material. And I just hold the filter to my eye, didn't even need my light. And I said, oh, would you take that one out, please? And yeah, that one. And another one. And the guy started to smile. And he said, you know, I'm always surprised why more people don't use one of those filters when they're buying gemstones. I said, so you know what I'm doing? He said, yeah, you're picking out the synthetics. I said, that's absolutely right. The ruby goes red, but the synthetics go super psychedelic neon red. So if I'm looking at stones that are roughly the same color, I should see the same reaction. He said, I know, that's why I say people should. I said, but you know that there's a mixture. If you know, why didn't you pull them out? This says ruby. In the United States, it's against the law to sell something as ruby that's not ruby. He said, it is ruby. It's just not grown by nature. I said, you know what you're doing. He said, look, lady, I buy by the kilo and I sell by the kilo. And it's not my responsibility to tell you how to know what you're buying. That's trade to trade. We're not talking about somebody like in the wholesale districts around the world where some consumer comes in and the knowledgeable know how to take advantage of the unknowledgeable. This is trade to trade. So anybody who thinks that just because they're a jeweler or just because they're a gemologist, that they can buy and take somebody's word for what they're selling, very often when it's misrepresented, it's unintentional. This man with the chrome tourmalines, he really wasn't trying to misrepresent. He bought them in Eder Oberstein for chrome tourmaline. How did the others get mixed in? I don't know. Was somebody dishonest, or they're all green stones on a table and somehow they got mixed in? I don't know. But he was unaware that they were not chrome tourmalines, and he was unaware that all of his Paraibas were not Paraiba. And I go by every now and then and I check his inventory, and he's selling what he says he's selling today. But you know what? He carries a Chelsea filter with him on his buying trips. And it's not everything. He carries other tools too now. But the point is, you need to know what portable, inexpensive pocket tools you can take with you to the show floor or to the field like you do. And look.
Antoinette, regarding that, in the field, you know, most of the time when I go, for example, to a sapphire mine in Ilocos, you don't have, like in a trade show, a tray with just sapphire or a tray with just Paraiba tourmaline. You have a mix of everything. So if you start to look at a rough from a mine run in Burma or in Madagascar with a Kelsey filter, of course, everything will be different because, you know, there is a sapphire, there is a garnet, there is a beryl, everything is mixed. So that's why I don't use too much the Kelsey filter, because when I go to the field, all the stones are mixed. And I know that.
However,
but it's different because the parcels are supposed to be, oh, this is blue sapphire. But in the field, there is nobody who tell you that, oh, this is blue sapphire. This is just what I mined today. And this is, you have to find out by yourself.
But this can help you quickly put together likes with likes, because even if it's an iolite, let's say you had a tanzanite, an iolite, a blue sapphire, some of the Paraiba tourmalines are almost sapphire blue. You should be lucky enough to have that. But no. But even in the field, if you have the Chelsea filter and you have a light, you have a warm light, an incandescent light, because the reactions that are written up in all the books are based on incandescent light. That's the primary reason you need a warm light. So you light the rocks, even if you're in the mine, you take your mag light, you shine it on the rocks, you use this, and then maybe over here, there's something else, same color, but different mineral. Or maybe you just see all this rough that's piled up that somebody's selling. The Chelsea filter, if you're looking at the same color stone, maybe slightly lighter or darker shades, but the same hue, you'll get the same reaction. If it's a different mineral altogether, even if it doesn't go pink or red, it's a different shade of that color. So you can separate a lot of rough that is the same color rough, like chrome tourmaline from tsavorite, just by the reactions side by side. You see that they're different. Even if it doesn't go red, you can see that it's different. And when it does go red, the shade is different.
I tell you two reasons why. When I go to the field, number one, I don't do that because there are two reasons. Number one reason, you know, this is what I use when I go to the field. I use a tough case. This is what I bought at GA 20 years ago. It's still, you know, in condition after 20 years in the field. And inside, this is what you have inside.
Darkfield Loop, your mag light.
The Darkfield Loop, which is my favorite instrument, because I work mainly on ruby and sapphire. And unlike many people, you know, I study gemology. And when you study gemology, you spend months working with a microscope.
Yes.
And then I work in a lab, and I work again every day with a microscope. the main interest, the main reason why I love the Darkfield Loop is the Darkfield Loop is a microscope that I can take in the field, so I can keep my skills at the level. I can look at stone in the field like if I was in the lab, because I look them with a Darkfield. And if you are good with a microscope in a lab or in school, you go to the field with a Darkfield loop, you can still see, if it's natural, synthetic, if the stone is treated or not. So the Darkfield loop is really good for me. Then the thing is, I need to have a tough case, because when I go to the field, I'm walking for kilometers and kilometers. If I go in a soft case like yours, and my instruments are touching each other, they are every 6 months I will have to buy a new set.
You're right.
I have the same instrument for 20 years. There is foam inside. They don't move. I cannot put a Kelsey filter inside because there is no space. There is just space for the Darkfield loop, the tweezer, my normal Tenix loop, the dichroscope, and the spectroscope. Now, the second reason usually I don't. I have a Kelsey filter, but it's in my second bag at home in the hotel. There is a second reason why I don't do that in the field when I go to a mining site or thing like that, is if you go in the field and when you want to buy some stone, you start to take out tools and you start to look the stone for 10 or 20 minutes. Every second you look at the stone, the price go up. And if you start to go out to come with fancy instruments that nobody has seen, in the next 5 minutes, you have a crowd of 20 people. And I can tell you, you will never have a good price. Right. So everything you do in the field, when you start to do some fancy stuff, you are making the price you will pay higher. When you go to the field, you have to look at the stone, and within few seconds, you say you want to buy, you make one offer, and maybe there will be a counter offer or something like that. But if you spend half an hour checking the stone, you will never be able to buy them. Even if you, because you say, oh, this guy, I noticed there is something in my parcel that I don't know. Suddenly, the guy don't want to sell anymore.
Right. Well,
so
when I say,
if I go out in the field with a Kelsey filter and I start to put light and things like that, I make a show, I will never be able to buy the stone, and especially not at my price.
Yes, that may be true, but you see, when I say in the field, I don't mean like you in the field where you're buying from all of these miners. I'm talking about in the field. If I am going to North Carolina,
but most of the time I don't go to trade shows, so that's why. This is,
you're buying in the field
at the mine, at the mine or in gem market. If I go in the gem market, when you go in the gem market and you start to use instruments that people are not used to see, they become curious.
That's true, but for example,
have a great discussion, but you will not be able to buy anything.
I've just learned a very important piece of information from you. I'm not going to use my tools. If I go to Burma and I go to one of the markets and I'm buying, I'm not going to pull my tools out there. I might do it when I get back to my hotel.
Sure. It might be fun. It might be fun if you want to socialize with people. You start to show instrument, and some people speak English. They will ask you about that as a social thing. It will be great.
Right, but this also you mentioned
people to show you stone. When you bring them instruments they don't know, good luck.
Right.
Or maybe they will try to test you with all kind of synthetic and funny stone and things like that. But if you want to buy rubies from this mine, you are not really maximizing the chance for the ruby from that mine to come to you.
Yes,
that's why what I say usually, most of the time, what I say, when you go to the field, the most powerful instrument is a brain full of knowledge and wisdom. And the perfect thing is, Justin witnessed me buying several times. Usually, I don't really use my tool except the Darkfield Loop, because for corundum there is so much risk about synthetic on a treated stone that at one point, when it's over a few dollars, I want to check.
Yeah.
But most of the time, there is one thing in the field when you deal with rough, you have the crystal shape. So, for example, to recognize tanzanite compared to aquamarine, you need crystal
Yeah,
system. You are
exactly.
not dealing with facet stone. I
Right.
deal mostly with rough.
Yes.
So with rough, if you know about cleavage, if you know about crystal shape, if you know about the fracture, conchoidal, not conchoidal, all these things, then you have you're in a much stronger position
Yes.
than when I was a student in Burma. I had your book, and in the market in Yangon, I was using the tools, and some of my teachers told me, Vincent, this is why you don't get good price, because of all these tools. People are afraid to show you a good stone, because if they show a stone and then you say, you if I the guy with the instrument had a doubt about this stone, people will think that, oh, maybe this stone is a synthetic. So then this guy who showed the stone and there was no deal. Why there was no deal? Oh, maybe there is something funny. So people are afraid to show you stone.
I hear what you were saying, and I will keep that in mind when I go to these other exotic places to buy. But if I'm in North Carolina, in the middle of a mine, an open pit mine, and it's known for its emeralds, but it's also known for hiddenite.
Mhm.
And it's also known for quartz crystals and lots of other things, including gold and some very interesting things, all in this one big pit. But it's very nice to have the Chelsea filter, because when I'm looking across the ground for those green things and I suddenly see this reddish reaction, oops, I found the some really beautiful emerald crystals where the crystal wasn't showing, just an itsy bit part of the crystal was just coming through the rock, and I'm walking along the wall looking up and down, and I have actually it was a very strong light. It was bouncing off the walls, filter to the eye, and then I see the red.
Mhm.
And so it drew me right to that particular stone. So it does have a place if you're involved from this guy had me down there because he wanted to use my consulting services about how to go about the mining and the extraction and getting his rough to market. But I found the Chelsea filter to be one of the most fun things I've used. But the Darkfield Loop, most people just don't comprehend its value. Now, initially, you notice this one, there's a lot of space between the end of the lens and where the opening is over which you put your stone, right? And they can't really, I assume that whoever is watching can't see this, but the thing about the Darkfield Loop is that you have the light coming through, and then there's a dark background. The light comes through the sides. There's a black background at the base. The light's coming around from the sides, so it's providing lateral lighting against a black background. And that combination, you also have a lighter background where the light as it comes up. But you have the opportunity to view what you're looking at against a black background and also the lighter background, with light coming through the stone this way, and it illuminates the inclusions in a way that is very difficult to do in any other environment. I think, and that's why most people listening will probably remember when fracture-filled diamonds just entered the market.
Mhm.
And diamond dealers were used to holding a stone steady. You moved your loop back and forth and you changed the position, but when you were looking, you didn't move that diamond.
Mhm.
Well, the technique changes radically if you're looking for a flash effect from a fracture filling, because you have to be moving. We
Mm,
developed what used to be called the banana rock and roll technique for the fracture filled diamonds. And then this man came to Tucson with one of these Darkfield loops that he had made. The problem was he needed it for jewelry pieces, rings. So he needed to be able to get the ring, the diamond in the ring, down in the well. And there
mm,
wasn't enough space. So he had one custom made, and it took a lot of time because your distance for focal distance and all of that stuff had to be very carefully calculated. And I had six fracture filled diamond rings, different sizes, different shapes. And we
mm,
put this on the mag light, and I put the first one in. I go like this, whoa! Boom! The flash effect jumped out. And then I did it with every one of the rings. And of all of the rings I had brought for this particular workshop, I described two as being extremely easy to see with your standard loop. Okay.
mm,
Two were moderately difficult, and two were very difficult. So my
mm,
first thought was, this must be the really easy one.
mm,
No, it was the hard one. And the others, it was like you saw flash effect throughout the whole stones. So the Darkfield Loop was suddenly of interest to retailers
mm,
because they had been buying fracture filled diamonds without realizing it from people coming into their stores to
mm.
sell them their diamonds. They had fallen on hard times and all this. Well, no, they were pulling one right over the jewelers. But the Darkfield Loop suddenly was of interest. The good news was people started getting Darkfield loops and they started using them for diamonds. And so in one of my workshops in Tucson, I said, okay, now let's go to the Darkfield Loop. And somebody said, no, I'm here for colored stones. I said, yes, that's what we're here for. We're going to now look at colored gemstones with the Darkfield Loop. But I thought the Darkfield Loop was just to spot the fracture filled diamonds. I said, no, that's the good use for it. But the real value of a Darkfield Loop is for colored gemstones, because you can see things, as you know, inside a colored stone using a Darkfield Loop that you can see them eventually using a standard loop. You can find them, but the way the lighting is presented in what you're looking at with the Darkfield Loop, that's what makes the difference in terms of what you see with this at a glance and what you see with this just with a glance without even
Except,
looking carefully.
except there is one thing with the Darkfield Loop. The Darkfield Loop, I think it's probably one of the most powerful tools. But if you know what you look at,
Well,
and
yes.
because if somebody has no gemological knowledge, he see an inclusion, he don't know if it's a crystal, a bubble, a negative crystal, a pinpoint. He don't know the difference with that. And many people, they see things, but they have no idea about what
What?
these kind of things are telling and
Right.
which kind of conclusions they can do. So if you have studied gemology for 6 months and you studied Colorstone for 4 months, for example, and you became very good at working with a microscope and recognizing the inclusion and things like that, then the Darcy loop is useful because you can keep your skills at the same level if every day, if you don't have the money to buy a microscope and not a plate, but if you are using a Darcy loop regularly, you will be able to maintain your skill. I have seen many gemologists, they study gemology for 5 or 6 months and then they never use a microscope for 2 years. All the knowledge, all the practice is gone. If you have a Darcy loop, you can maintain your skills year after year, like if you had a microscope. Now, if you are a lab gemologist and you work on a microscope for 5 or 10 years, then probably your knowledge about anodification, with a microscope at the right level. Then you go with a Darcy loop, you go to a trade show or you go to a market and you look at a parcel, for example, of small faceted sapphire, you will be able to separate the one you are sure are natural, the one you are sure are synthetic, and the one you are sure are treated, and the one that you are not very sure about.
Exactly. But you know, you
So
just raised
it all depends about the level of skill you have. And that's why I still say, the most important tool is a gemologist with a head full of knowledge.
yes,
If you don't have
exactly.
the knowledge about the stone, you cannot use the Darkfield loop. With a
That's
microscope, it's different because I take the stone and I see blue and light blue, or I see that and that. So, or the refractometer. The refractometer, I get 175.2.
yes.
Okay, that's something. Then you go to a book and you find out what it is. With the Darkfield loop, it's kind of you have to be able to
You have to have
explain.
a photographic library in your brain based upon everything you have seen and learned in all of those
Well,
months of study.
I found out the Darkfield loop was the most useful instrument to me in the
Feel.
in the instrument that I had, because when I went to Burma, I didn't travel only with gem identification made easy, but I had also the photo atlas of inclusion by John Koivula. So
Right.
every time I was looking at a stone, I had the photo atlas next, and I was looking, and then the Darkfield loop was super useful because without the Darkfield loop, the photo atlas would have been just a useless book for me
Yeah.
because I had no idea to look inside the stone. But with the photo atlas, the Darkfield loop became my favorite instrument because every stone, it's a kind of mini Star Wars. You are one of my
Photo,
friends, astrophysician. He's looking at stars, and I was looking at inclusion, and it was
photo
great.
atlas, for me, the photo atlas was the most important book to enter the market at the time. And of course, there have been subsequent editions as well, new stones, new inclusions. You had to do a new book. But you mentioned something a little earlier that I think is so critically important. And one of the things that I have taken particular pride in, if you will, I try not to feel proud, but Gem ID Made Easy was a really difficult book to write. It was difficult because, number one, I had to decide which tools to cover. And then I had to try to explain it in ways that people could understand in the written word. And then, and then tell them how to use them together. For most situations, most people, you do not know what you are looking at with just one tool. Sometimes with experience, okay, but you need to you think you know what you have with this one, so you've got to have a backup to support your conclusion with the first one, or to add even more evidence that you were correct, and so on and so forth. So coming up with the right tools. But my goal was not to write a book that would make someone a gemologist, but rather write a book which would enable them to know more than they knew yesterday, and to know how to do something that might help them recognize what they have, which they wouldn't have been able to do before they learned this how to use this tool or what to look for stone by stone. But I wanted to open the door to how much fun it could be, how exciting it could be, that these stones that may look all the same and they're all cut and polished in the same shape and the same color, but there's so much more to them than that. And when you have the right tools to see into them, or to see how they react to certain things, why do I like certain rubies better than other rubies? Because some rubies fluoresce under both long and short wave, and when you go outdoors, they keep a beautiful color red. And when you're indoors under incandescent light, they usually have a really beautiful red, but they fluoresce and you go outdoors and they keep that red. Some rubies do, some rubies don't. Most Thai rubies don't. Most brown rubies from Mocha do. And there are just certain characteristics. Colorless diamonds. People say, "Oh, I don't want one that's fluorescent." What do you mean you don't want one that's fluorescent? I know fluorescence is bad. Fluorescence is bad? Yeah, blue fluorescence. I don't want blue. I said, why wouldn't you want blue fluorescence? Because it's bad. I said, says who? The jewelers. That's because they don't understand it. Now, if you have a diamond that fluoresces blue, a colorless diamond that fluoresces blue, that means when you go outdoors during daylight, that's going to generate a blue reaction. You don't see blue, but it will actually make that diamond look even whiter. Now, if it's too strong, then maybe in some cases the brilliance is reduced or it gets cloudy, but that's rare. Now, the other problem with fluorescence is that even though they are discounted, very often they're not discounted enough. If you have a diamond with a grading report, and by the way, today most diamonds are still graded under a UV emitting light source. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when I was a kid growing up, nobody graded diamonds under a UV emitting fluorescent tube light. They had a screen so that the UV was not being emitted, so that they could grade the true body color of the stone. When UV emitting fluorescent lights and grading lamps that you're holding the stone right under it and it's emitting long wave ultraviolet and it glows. If it's a strongly blue fluorescing diamond, it could be overgraded by 3 or 4 grades. The Accredited Gemologists Association did a research study on the impact of fluorescence in diamond grading, and the number of diamonds that when you graded it under a non-UV emitting light source were 4 grades lower than the grade shown on the respected laboratory report. Now, they were discounted, but let's take that D diamond. A D diamond that's really a G, the difference in what the cost should be is a whole lot more than 15 to 20%. So you get a G diamond, one that's going to be G every time you're inside, whenever you're indoors, unless it's outdoors during daylight, the color you're going to see is the inherent body color. And if we're seeing G, then you should be paying for G, not for D. Okay, maybe G plus, because sometimes it does look so much whiter. When I was a kid, blue fluorescent diamonds carried a premium. People paid 10 to 15% more because they looked whiter in certain lights. Now,
somebody who collects a fluorescent diamond, he will pay more. I know somebody, one of my friends, used to collect a fluorescent diamond. He will pay more for a diamond with fluorescent because they're special.
The most challenging, the most challenging search I ever had was someone at one of the major American museums in Washington, D.C. And this particular person wanted a diamond band with 5 diamonds, each one being a different color fluorescence. He wanted colorless diamonds, but he wanted 5, and he wanted each one of them to show a different color fluorescence. It took me 8 months to find matching diamonds that would look the same, because diamonds can fluoresce any color. Usually it's blue. Sometimes the next second color is probably yellow, but they can fluoresce any color. It took me months. I finally succeeded in putting it together. So, and the reason he had,
I know a jeweler, a designer, all her diamond jewelry is made with fluorescent diamond, and you can enjoy the ring with the ring or the jewelry with a normal light, but then when you put a fluorescent light, you see something different. So she is doing that on purpose. She's her diamond, her diamond jewelry. You can enjoy it with 2 different lights.
Absolutely.
She's a Russian designer, and her jewelry is great, all with fluorescent diamond.
Yeah, my engagement ring has a natural pearl in the center, and it's flanked on either side by an old cut diamond, because the ring's from the mid 1800s. And one diamond fluoresces a strong blue, and the other one doesn't fluoresce at all. The average person doesn't see the difference. I wear it all the time. They don't look at my 2 diamonds and say, Even outdoors, they don't say that one's whiter than the other one, because when you grade diamonds, you're not grading it from the top, you're grading it from the side anyway against a flat white to see the subtle differences. But the people notice the character, they notice the personality, and there is absolutely no difference. Even the diamond that has strong blue fluorescence, that diamond is just as sparkling and just as brilliant and just as beautiful as the other one. And people will say, oh, I don't want a fluorescent diamond because they're not as brilliant. No, the brilliance really has more to do with the cutting, as you know, in most people. But yes, if it's overly strong, it can reduce the brilliance and liveliness. But most fluorescent diamonds don't. They're just as beautiful as one that isn't fluorescent. So anyway.
Antoinette, I want to come back a little bit on the colorstone thing, because just before you went on diamond, you were speaking about something that I really appreciate with your book. And I can tell you that when I was in Burma, I think that if I didn't had the opportunity to study my 4 months gemology class with your book, I would have had a lot of problem, because every week gemology in Burma is not taught the same way as if you go to study at GIA or FGA and things like that. The issue is gemology in the consuming market world, like FGA, GIA, ING in France, even AIGS and things like that. All this gemology is focused on consuming market. So it means you are just looking at faceted stone mainly, and the main market for all these gemology degree is people going to work later, maybe in a jewelry store, with their family and things like that. When you go to study gemology in Burma, in the small school I was studying with, the main, there is some noise. Do you hear?
I think it's
Yeah.
just your voice echoing in her speakers, so you just ignore that.
Okay. So I come back to Burma. When I studied gemology in Burma, the main market for this small gemological school was to train people how to buy stone in the market in Yangon or in Mogok. So it was gemology for the producing market. I have never seen any other course except the one in Burma that focus on gemology for producing market. We, for example, we were explained about the refractometer, but we had a demonstration about the refractometer, but there was not enough liquid in the school for the student to play with the refractometer, so we never used the refractometer. The teacher showed us how to take a refractive index, but that's the only time we use a refractometer. I never used a refractometer during my gemology study in Burma. I had to wait to go to GIA in order to become an expert with a refractometer. And even, well, no, to start to learn about the refractometer, because actually I became an expert when I studied GFGA class, because the conoscope GA doesn't know about the conoscope, but at GFGA they know. So in Burma, it was a different type of gemology. Every Friday, we had we didn't have a class, we had a quiz. So every Friday, you had all the students that had to come together, and they were given about 20 stone. And you had a kind of a 20 stone exam. It was not all the time 20 stone, it was a bunch of stone. And everybody had to identify the stone. And we had to do that as a group. Like if you were going, with your friend, you go in the market and you study stone. So we were a group of 4 people, and there was 4 or 5 group of people. And we only had as a tool the pocket tools. We had a loop, we had a polariscope, we had a dichroscope, and we had a cup of, a cup of tea with some water.
Yes, right.
And we
For
had a hand
immersion.
spectroscope. Yes,
Yes.
for immersion, to be able to see color zoning and things like that. That's it. So, and at the end, the winner was the one who did the less mistake. But there were some stone. It was not possible to identify them correctly with all these tools. But it was kind of fun because there was an incentive. I never see that in any other school. For example, the team that is winning, let's say there is a team, they get perfect result, 20 stone on 20, and the second best team get only 19. And the team number 3 get 15, and the team number 4 get 10. For every mistake, you had to pay $1 to find. Every member of the team had to pay $1 that, and all this money will be used to finance the trip at the end of the class. Basically, the school was taking everybody to Burma, and all the mistakes, everybody had to pay for their mistake. And of course, nobody wanted to pay. So that was an incentive for people to study gemology, because if you were good, you will do less mistakes. At the beginning, I was very bad. I was the worst of everybody. For one simple reason, I was just a beginner. I was a total rookie. And in my class, you had some people, they started dealing with gemstone at 5 years old in Mogok, and they were 20. So they had 15 years of experience. So when you had a 4 stone in front of them, there was a ruby, there was a spinel, a garnet, or a zircon. Oh, that's a ruby, that's a spinel, that's a garnet, that's a zircon. When me, I was looking at that, I say, that's red. There were 4 stones, red, and I had no idea. And they were never wrong. They were all the time correct. And now I could not understand. Now, the thing is, your book, because it explained perfectly, okay, if you take the Darkfield Loop, and then you do the first test with that, then you do the second test with the microscope, and then you check with the polariscope, or you check with the spectroscope. For example, classic, the stone is red. Is it dichroic? Yes. If it's dichroic, you have a ruby or maybe zircon. If it's not dichroic, you have spinel or you have garnet. How to separate spinel or garnet? You take the spectroscope, you check, and if you have the band, you know that it's a garnet, and the spinel don't have the band at the same place. So finish. That was super good, because in the book, in the class we were teaching, it was not explained as clearly as in your book. And I was the only one to have that book. I had that book at home, and I was not allowed to bring the book at school. So every evening I was studying on your book, and within 2 months, I went from the worst to one of the best.
Yes.
But because I had your book.
You see,
no, true.
I can now take credit, Vincent, for helping you become the premier field gemologist.
No.
It was worth fighting it just for that. But seriously, it makes me feel it makes me feel that my time was well spent. You know, as I mentioned to you before, I don't like to write. I write when I think something is needed and it needs to be said to help people. My father was passionate about the field, but he would get very angry when he knew someone in Washington was deliberately cheating consumers. And the thing that was the catalyst for me in terms of Gem ID Made Easy was I was on the phone with him. He called me. His client, a lovely young woman, was sitting in the office with him. And he said, "You're not going to believe this, but Ms. So-and-so brought in a beautiful stone to show me, an emerald. She brought it to show me what a bargain she had gotten in New York City, because I'd already appraised a pair of emerald earrings for her several years ago. And each of the emeralds in her earrings was 1/4 the size of this big emerald that she had just purchased. And she knew she was getting a bargain, because this big emerald that she just bought, that was so much bigger than either one of the stones in her ears, And it was half the price of what she'd paid for the emerald earrings. Bigger stone, much more carat weight, half the price. She knew she had gotten a real steal, was the word she used, like you steal from somebody. But she had gotten a steal on this emerald from this person in New York City. And he said, hold on. And I hear him say, now watch, Ms. Whatever. And he had a beaker of methylene iodide, into which he immersed her big emerald, which was suddenly colorless, top, bottom, a little thin plane of green glue holding the two parts together, a composite stone, a doublet. So she had paid $16,000 for a doublet made with synthetic colorless spinel top and bottom. It was worth maybe a couple $100 for the gold setting, okay, in which they had mounted it. She nearly had I heard her scream on the phone when she saw what happened. I could hear the scream. And he says to her, Ms., how stupid can you be? He had a way with his clients. How stupid. And I said to him, it's not stupidity, it's ignorance. And there is a big difference. So that's when I thought, she's a consumer. But I know jewelers who could have made the same mistake.
Well, I know many, for me, doublet is probably the most dangerous stone. Any very good gemologist can make a mistake on a doublet if they forget one thing: check the girdle. Because when you work in a gem lab, you put the stone under the microscope. If the doublet is well done, you will not see the flattened bubble, in the plane and things like that. You get a refractive index, you get emerald, okay. You check the inclusion, you see, you check on the top emerald type inclusion. If you are a bit too quick and you are not systematic, you can make a mistake because you forget to check if it's a doublet. But you have to put that in your routine. At the 20 stone exam, when you are studying gemology, a doublet, when you are in a rush, you have a short amount of time, and if you don't check the girdle, you make a mistake, and then you done.
But let me tell you one other story.
I will say I'm very humble with doublet, because I know that maybe one day, under pressure or something like that, I might make a mistake on a doublet.
Particularly if it's a true, what we used to describe. Right. If we used to describe them as true doublets, you could have genuine emerald, pale emerald on the top, and genuine pale emerald on the bottom, and the green glue. So now it's a deep green emerald, and it says emerald.
Well done. I know one guy in Germany who is a specialist to make nice emerald doublet. I can tell you, his stuff are.
But
make doublet, it's an art. I respect a lot of people who make doublet. They are artists, and their product are, in my opinion, they are. A synthetic or treated stone, you're less likely to make a mistake actually than on a doublet. Very good doublet is super dangerous.
Going back to that true doublet with the pale green emerald top and bottom, when you're looking at a large emerald that's a rich green color, and you look through the Chelsea filter and you see pink, not red, pink. The deeper the color, the redder the red should be through the Chelsea filter. And one of the quickest ways to spot an emerald doublet that was made with Colombian emerald, but pale material on the top, material on the bottom. You look with your loupe and you see a three-phase inclusion. You know it's emerald. You know it might be Colombian emerald, or at least chromium-rich emerald, similar to Colombian. If you see pink, you don't know what it's telling you, but you know something is wrong with that stone, and the something has to be related to the color, because if you see the three-phase inclusions, you know it's emerald, and it looks deep green, but you're getting pink, even a pale pink. Very high probability you're looking at a doublet with deep green glue binding together pale top and bottom. And Dad had several of those in his teaching collection, and I had one in my teaching collection, and it disappeared at one of my classes. And I sure hope I hope the person just took it for their own interest and not to sell. But you know, this is where the Gem ID for me was the most important book I ever wrote, because it wasn't to turn the reader into a gemologist. It was to turn the reader into somebody who could learn a little more. They could learn how to use certain tools. They could begin to see how it all came together. What you said about the kids who could, who, with the 30 years experience or 20 years, who could just with their eye. Okay? Mm-hmm. Each stone, my father used to use the term, it drives my husband crazy today when I say, look at the personality of that stone. The personality. My father, assuming they were the same shapes and the same cut, he could look at stones and from their personality, in other words, the way light was moving through it, how much was coming back, how much dispersion, he could recognize the stone. I mean, he knew, he could tell, he could separate instantly by personality. And if you have enough experience, I mean, he was passionate about gems from the time he was a little child in elementary school, found a rock. He didn't know what it was. The teacher said she didn't know. He hopped on a streetcar, went to what was then called the National Museum. Now we know it as the Smithsonian. Looked up the head of the Gem and Mineral Department. He was in elementary school. He wanted to talk to the key guy, Dr. Foshag, who told my father what he had and why it was not worth collecting. And he happened to mention the museum would send duplicates of things they would receive from all over the world to other museums, but they threw away things better than what my father had found. So a couple of days later, he's looking out his window and my father's in the trash bin, looking for the things they threw away. But he looked at gems his entire life. He was always looking at stones, and he would describe them as having different personalities, and they do. And if you have enough experience and you look at them, and you look at them in different lighting environments, you know, because you go to buy in the field, they can look very different in outdoor light versus indoor light versus incandescent versus fluorescent. The type of light in which you look at any colored gemstone affects the color you see. And it also affects the way the light moves. Personality.
Yeah. That's cool. In this profession, like in many others, the 10,000 hour rule. If you spend 10,000 hours looking at stone, if you spend 10,000 hours looking at antiques, furniture, or watches, you will get a level of expertise. Your brain will recognize some information. You will not be able to explain why you know it's a ruby or why you know it's a zircon. Your brain will immediately tell you that's a ruby, that's a zircon. You will not be able to explain why, but probably you will be right because you have spent 10,000 hours. Your brain will wash pattern and will recognize pattern. Now, where your book is very good is that actually it helps to make a shortcut on that 10,000 hours, because most of the other book, you know, there is a book, a classic gemological book will explain how to use a microscope, then how to use a polariscope, then how to use the refractometer. but very few will tell you how to use the instrument together. Like first you check with that. First you check with the polariscope, and then you separate the stone into two parts, and then you go with the dichroscope on the stones that have color. Of course, it's useless on
Colors.
stones that are pastel and things like that. And and what is the shortest way to identify a stone with two or three instruments? And what can you do, and what is not possible with these three instruments? If you have three instruments with you, whatever the instrument, there are some stones that you will be able to identify for sure.
For sure.
There are some stones you will not be able to identify, except if you modify. For example, you take out maybe the Darkfield Loop and you bring the calcifier.
Right.
Then you have another set of three instruments.
But you're
But
not sure.
98% of the stone can be identified with three pocket instruments.
Well, this was it. He used to say,
Your book is the only one that explains that. I have never seen any other book about gemology explaining that. The book that I was using for my class in Burma was a classic British book, Gem Testing by Anderson, where, it explained every instrument, how you do to properly, test the instrument. But then the combination of instrumentation, why to use this one first, and then this one, and then this one, in order to go quickly to the identification.
yes.
I never found that in any other book except yours. And I was very lucky that it was the first book I read when I went to Burma. And, I had this book and I said, okay, if the stone is red, I take first that instrument, I check, then I check the second one. And that's the way I didn't lose too much money on Friday morning when there was a quiz with all the other one, because I knew, depending on the color of the stone, what instrument will be the best one to use first, and then the second one. And most of my classmates were just doing random.
Right. Well, I tried to make it a practical book. You see, it's what my father always said. These are tools. You use them for a reason. It's not just a science. You're not just studying the science. You're studying the application of information that helps you in some way with what you're doing. So there are tools you can use in your office.
Practical science. This is practical science. Practical. This is the same. When next month we are going to speak with John Coivula. It is the same with the microscope. For example, you have the Darkfield loop and you have the normal loop. Well,
Yes.
these are two different lighting combinations.
Exactly.
If you want to identify a stone as this or that, actually the best way is to use multiple lighting. You use first the Darkfield loop, then you go to Brightfield loop, then you go to maybe cross polars. And then because if you use different lighting combination and you
Exactly.
cross, all the results, then you get much more information than if you just use one light. So actually the key point with the microscope is on every stone to use 4 5 different lights. Like
That's it.
when you have when you go around with pocket instrument, you have usually 3 instruments, and depending if it's a red stone or a blue stone or a yellow stone, you start with this one, you go with that one, and then you go with that one. And this is where, Antoinette, I tell you, congrats, because so far I don't have seen anything better than your book in order to teach people how to go around with 3 instruments and save time.
And you
save
just
time,
mentioned also.
and especially, and don't, even if they don't have spent 10,000 hours looking at stone, and they don't have in their brain, a perfect kind of gemological brainy computer that can identify everything by sight,
When
which
you-
is very dangerous. When I found out that this stuff, the brainy stuff, when I was spending all my time in Burma, and I was very, I spent many hours looking at Burmese stone, I was pretty good at sight identification of Burmese stone. But then I went to Madagascar, different light, different stone. I made so many mistakes. I was feeling like a totally stupid, like, coming back to my first day in class and everybody was better than me. Then I say, okay, sight identification, when you change light and you change place, is dead. Let's go back to instrumentation and make sure that I know
The
what
other
I
thing,
do,
when
because then I don't trust my brain anymore.
when I did some of my lists, I didn't say, I said green stones. What you're going to see with this green stones, red stones. I didn't list them. I put by color first. And then, of course, I identified the stone. But my father wanted to do each gemstone family by the family names. I said, I think it's easier for people to comprehend if you say green stones, red stones, yellow stones.
It was easier for me. It was easier for me.
Thank you. Well,
Antoinette,
I was a beginner. I went to the market. There was a green stone. That's it.
yes, Justin.
So I have some questions that I've been building up from the audience. Maybe we can go through a few, and I know we're going to get onto some other topics as well. So going back a little bit, I know you were talking a lot about the Chelsea filter and all the different ways we can use the Chelsea filter. How do you? This is a question coming from Josie Bollock. How do you feel about some of the other filters that are out there? Do you use them, or is the Chelsea filter the one for you?
The only other one that I use is the synthetic emerald filter set that Hanneman and Hodgkinson put together years ago. Only because it's fast and it's simple and it's portable. It can fit in my pocket if I'm at a trade show looking for emeralds for a client or for my collection or something.
Yeah.
But you still need the Chelsea filter. You have to use the Chelsea filter first to see whether that green stone, the emerald in this case, goes red or not. And then if it does go red, you use the, quote, synthetic emerald filter. And it tells you that there's too much chromium, basically. If it still shows red through the Hanneman filter set, then you know it has more chromium than natural. It was made in a laboratory, well, not even a laboratory, factory, whatever. It's made by humankind, okay? But there are emeralds, of course, that we discovered, starting with Zambia, that don't go red through the Chelsea filter. So if you know it's emerald, so you've got to use your microscope or your refractometer or something else to know it's emerald, but you know you're looking at an emerald and it doesn't go red with the filter, then you use what they call the support filter. Now, I've never needed to use the support filter because I can separate those in other ways, generally with my loop. But for somebody who's new or inexperienced, and you need to know, that filter set is fast and easy, and it was one of the biggest, costliest mistakes you could make 15 years ago, was buying one of the synthetic emeralds as a natural emerald.
Yeah.
And so the Hanneman filter made it very easy to know. In fact, I was in Tucson at a major gem show, and I was looking for an emerald, and I'm going up and down, Chelsea filter, synthetic emerald filter, Chelsea filter, synthetic emerald filter, because I was actually testing the synthetic emerald filter. It was brand new. And I get to a major emerald dealer, and he says, Antoinette, over here, you've got to look at my latest acquisition. An amazing, incredible, deep, rich green color. And I come over, smile on my face, Chelsea filter, synthetic emerald. He said, what's the matter? I said, we need to check that emerald a little more closely, because either the filter isn't working, it's a brand new filter, and I'm sure it's just needs some tweaking. No, the guy bought. This is a man with 25 years experience in emeralds, only emeralds. He had bought a lab-grown emerald as a genuine emerald from one of his major contacts from Colombia. You've never seen anybody so upset in your life. And I kept saying, well, come on, we'll go check it. And we checked it more closely under the microscope and so on. Yeah, definitely synthetic. And then he got the GIA report to prove it. And I suspect that the person from whom he bought it might be 6 feet under at this point, because I've never seen anyone so angry. But you're talking 6 figures worth of money back at this time. That's the kind of money you're talking about, somebody cheating. And the Chelsea filter and the synthetic emerald filter set, I would never, I mean, I was walking. I was moving and saw it. So talk about practical and life-saving in that case. So the synthetic emerald filter. Other, sorry, what was that question again? Which?
Well, I think you got it. Do you? Because you said you don't use any other filters, right? Just that.
That's right. The only other filters I use, the only other filter I use, yes, exactly, is the synthetic emerald filter set.
And so Rod Knowles just asked, are there different sources for those emerald filters, or is the Hanuman set the only one, or is there
The only one I have personally used and tested is the Hanuman Hodgkinson filter set.
Okay.
And I only use the emerald filter. I don't need the support filter. I mean, that's just me. But it work. I know they work. And so I keep them on me mostly for teaching, but also if I'm buying emeralds today, and have for a number of years now, really fine, very gemmy emeralds, I will check with the filter, both filters first before I do anything else, because it's so fast. And if I get the indication it's a synthetic, why should I bother taking the time to use anything else? So.
Yeah. And so going back to another tool that you were speaking about, the Darkfield Loop, Chris Moet was asking, because I know you were speaking a lot about using it at trade shows, so I'm guessing you're looking at a lot of cut stones. But he was asking
jewelry.
And in jewelry. And he was asking how useful is it in the rough stones? Or, is it only...
Absolutely. He may not have heard the story about the ruby rough dealer, whether it's rubies and whatever the rough material. We're talking colored gemstones. Obviously, a Chelsea filter is only used for colored gemstones.
The Darkfield Loop.
I'm sorry. We're talking about the Darkfield Loop, right? Okay. Well, the first thing I would do with the rough is use a Chelsea filter. The next thing I would do would be use a Darkfield Loop, so you can check the inclusions very quickly and easily, and you can see the definition of inclusions with the Darkfield Loop in a way you can't with a regular loop.
Yeah,
your 10 power loop or whatever.
Yeah, but most of the time in rough stone you cannot, because, for example, if you go to Sri Lanka or Madagascar,
I'm not hearing you clearly.
Most of the time with rough, when you go to a market, for example, in Mogok, in Sri Lanka or in Madagascar, Darkfield Loop is most of the time nearly useless unless the rough is broken.
Right.
If the rough is broken, you have a fracture, so you can see inside. But most of the time, because the rough is rounded, you cannot really see the inclusion, you just see the crust. Right. So you cannot see inside. That's why, most of the time I'm using a torchlight. Because with a torchlight, you can see if, with a very powerful torch, you can see, and a loop.
I love
the stone is milky or something like that.
But I love that torchlight. I like the torchlight you just showed, the torchlight that you just showed. I want one, because I don't have it. I use this, and I turn it on until I get the most intense beam, and then I've got a pretty intense beam. But it's not like that one. That would be fabulous. Oh, I can just tell. Yeah, no, that's amazing. This one doesn't.
This is a torchlight that is made in Mogok by a family, and it's specific for rubies. Rubies are small, so they make it, small here, so you can put the stone and you can check the ruby or sapphire.
Oh,
the rock, small rock, and you can really check. You just have to press here,
right?
And it's very tough. One can work for several years. You can refill with
batteries.
There is. No. You just plug it, so you don't have to pay for battery. You don't want to spend money on
and recharge it.
With a charger.
Yeah, so I'm telling you, I want one of those, because this works, but not as well as that would work.
It's great. You buy the torchlight one time, and then you don't spend. You don't buy batteries every day with with some other torch, where you have every day to buy batteries. No. It's just,
so the next
no.
Get an extra one at the next conference. I'll buy it from you. Buy an extra one, and then I'll buy it from you.
still the same problem. You have to go to Mogok because it's a small family business in Mogok and they don't ship. So you need somebody who go to Mogok and who go to that shop and who go to buy that torchlight for you. So
Okay.
you need to have somebody going to Burma. If you know a friend, then you can ask him, can you go to see the seller of the noble torchlight in Mogok? That's the
I,
only way.
I'm booking a trip to Mogok to meet you there and go into the field with you, buy a couple of little tools, but mostly I just want to be in Mogok with you because you know the lay of the land.
You know, there is coronavirus, there is COVID, and if I leave Thailand, I cannot come back. And you cannot go to Burma now. Cannot go to Burma. Cannot go to
Antoinette,
Mogok.
I have a friend who's going to Mogok like twice a year, and he brings those back with him. So I will try and get you one without having to go again. I think he still has.
But you can go through it.
But no, now I can tell my husband I have to go to Mogok because there is a tool there I have to have.
Yeah.
And don't undermine my motivation, my rationale for going to Mogok, Justin. No.
This, in my opinion, that's the best torchlight to check rough for ruby and sapphire.
That will complete my portable lab.
This is a torchlight from ruby people. Now, the Sri Lankan will tell you that for blue sapphire, they prefer a light that is not incandescent, that is a little bit more blue, that makes the stone better. Because this one is a little bit yellow.
That's an incandescent.
For rubies.
Yes.
And Spinel. But for blue sapphire, it doesn't make the stone color great.
Well, exactly. So, the fluorescent light, remember, the fluorescent lights are much higher on the blue end of the spectrum, and incandescent light is much higher on the red end of the spectrum. That's why those lights affect color.
But it's a great torchlight to be able to check for silk fractures. You see very well fractures, crystal, and things like that. So to check the clarity, not as a gemologist, but to check the clarity more like if you are a burner or if you're a cutter, you want to cut the stone or something like that.
You just reminded me. You just reminded me of something we haven't mentioned. You mentioned it briefly in an earlier conversation. An immersion cell.
Yeah.
Just something, a glass, anything, but some kind of liquid you can use to immerse stones. Baby oil. I mean, I use methylene iodide, but you can't scrap.
You have everywhere in the field. You go to the field, you have a bottle. You can have also a bottle of water with a blue cap that is very good if you want to do a check the iridium. But that's the immersion cell. Then you take some baby oil or you take some vodka.
Like you said, the baby oil.
Better than water.
Yes.
And this is what I did in your book. Huh?
Yes.
And then this is where the mag light is great because you put
exactly on top
of the mag light.
Exactly.
You put the liquid inside. You put the liquid inside, and then you have your Tenix loop.
Exactly.
And then the job is done.
Exactly. Do you know, that reminds me of another story at a trade show. Pink Topaz. I was at a booth and somebody came up to me and wanted me to look at this pink topaz they just bought because it was just fabulous and it was so much cheaper than anybody else. I don't understand how people who have been in our field for any length of time don't become immediately suspicious when they see something that looks better than normal and is less than half the price that others are asking for it. But she showed me the pink topaz. And I looked with my loop and I just happened to have a white business card and I was looking through the side and I could swear I was seeing something was wrong at the girdle area. And I thought I was seeing like little speckles. I thought, this looks coated. And we immersed it in baby oil over a light, and you could see the darker rim and little speckles, little tiny, like little dots around it from where they had coated the girdle, and some of it had gone down, up and down, beneath and above the girdle a little, and that was the speckling I was seeing. So the immersion was the easiest, fastest way to detect the coating, and it's the easiest way for diffusion treated blue sapphires. The immersion, you can see the effect.
Gas bubble. You take the stone, you put it down in the water.
The cap, the little.
You put your mag light
under it, right?
So you are not going for dark field. You are going for diffuse lighting, immersion, and
right.
with your loop, you check.
Right.
And if you put yourself right over, the light,
right?
The light, to make the difference between a negative crystal and a gas bubble, negative crystal, the refractive index, compared to a crystal, a negative crystal, and a gas bubble.
Right.
The crystal has a refractive index. For example, you have a Spinel inclusion in corundum.
Right.
The refractive index is very close, so the outline of the inclusion will be minimum. You will barely see the inclusion in diffuse lighting, in bright light. Now, if it's a negative crystal with inside a liquid, the difference between the refractive index of the stone and the liquid will be much higher. So you will be a stronger outline. And if it's a gas bubble, you will see a very dark rim and a bright center. Gas bubbles are very easy to identify in bright field with diffuse lighting. And with that, when you have a synthetic with a gas bubble or a doublet with a nice gas bubble, you can identify them quite easily. So it's all the time good. The Darkfield Loop is great because you have the backlight with you, and then with a bottle of water, you can have a perfectly a nice kind of immersion cell, and you can in field condition have with your loop an immersion cell on a diffuse lighting. Easy.
Well, it's.
And if you want fiber optic, this is a very good fiber optic. If you want fiber optic, you are doing. You can use that as a kind of fiber optic when you are doing your dark field.
Well, thank you, Justin. I want that.
I'll find one for you. I'll find one.
I definitely want one. And
the key point is to have the Darkfield Loop. And again, for the Darkfield Loop, still the same. Please don't forget that instruments are instruments. It's okay, but the most important is the knowledge. So basically, read the book, Gem Identification Made Easy by Antoinette. That's my best advice for today. This is the way I started my gemological career. I started reading that book. So to most of the people who are asking me question, how can you do that? Well, simple. I started my career reading Ruby and Sapphire by Richard Hughes and Gem Identification Made Easy by Antoinette. And then I went to study gemology.
That's the perfect.
Most people is, well, maybe do the same. I think it was quite good, Why don't you do the same? Read the book and go to study gemology. Because when you study gemology, when you read the book, it's nice you read the book, but you don't have the stone with you.
Right.
But when you go to study gemology, you are in class, you have stone, and you have your pocket tool with you, plus you have the microscope, plus you have a teacher who knows who know more about you and he can guide you. So then you are learning a lot.
Yeah, it's my goal when I wrote the Gem ID Made Easy book was Gem Identification Made Easy. I just felt that people needed something that was written in easy to understand language, that did not require a scientific background or even a technical background, but you could take it one instrument at a time. If you want to know what that stone is, you can't do it with your eye alone. You need certain tools. Depending upon your interest level and the stones you're interested in, 3 for sure, inexpensive ones. All 3, if you take a calcite microscope, a Chelsea filter, a loop, a light, incandescent light, and a fluorescent light, or whatever, you're under $200, and you've got the tools.
That's true. When I bought my Darkfield Loop, my GA Darkfield Loop was $300.
Oh, well, the Darkfield Loop adds to it. That's
That was $300. Now you can get it for 20, not GA made, but that's an originally GA made that they don't do anymore. It's great. After 20 years, it's still in condition.
Well,
Even after all the trip I did, you can get a Darkfield Loop now for $20. But when I started, the Darkfield Loop was $300. The spectroscope was $100, and the microscope was about 40. So it
well,
cost me $450 to buy my
you're,
my small
you're-
set.
exactly. But I'm going back much longer than you. I'm much older than you are. And so when I got started, there were not as many things or as many treatments or as many different gemstone varieties. So with a loop Chelsea filter and microscope and nothing else, you could identify about 85%. Now you can't identify that much. You have to add, if diamonds are your thing, you definitely need a long wave, short wave ultraviolet lamp, because the short wave is going to separate colorless synthetics from naturally formed synthetics. And your diamond type spotter, so you know if it's a type 1 diamond or a type 2 diamond. So I had to add that for diamonds. But if you're into diamonds and just diamonds, you don't need the Chelsea filter and the microscope. So that covers the cost of the diamond type spotter. But if you're into colored gemstones and diamonds,
Yeah, you need both.
I would not leave home without my calcite microscope and my Chelsea filter and my loop and my little light, and the one you're going to bring back for me, Justin. They can go in my jacket pocket, and I don't have to carry them. My jacket can carry the weight as I go around the shows and around the hallways. But I really felt the need for the book was not just for people with a serious interest in gemology. I saw it as a book for people who just wanted to know more about knowing what that stone was, taking it from a practical perspective. Here's the tool you need. Here's how to use it properly. You know how many people don't know that to use a UV lamp properly, the gem has to be on a black background? They do it on white. You're not going to see the same thing on white or beige that you will see if it's on a black background. They don't know that you need to turn the light on and leave the stone under it for more than a few seconds. Some stones take a while for that reaction to generate. And it was Thomas Henschwang who discovered that, in fact, with a UV lamp, if you are in a laboratory, you should leave the stone under it for 20 to 30 minutes. Look at it after a minute. Look at it after 5 minutes. Look at it after. But the maximum fluorescence that stone will produce will be somewhere between 20 and 25 minutes after you turn on the lamp. I didn't know that. Okay, I only learned that a few years ago. And
when we were,
long and short wave UV, it's I like the portable one because it's light, and it's true. My container is soft, but I used to have one about the same size that was hard, but that one disappeared on a flight from London to Pakistan, of all places. The question was, did it disappear in London or did it disappear in Karachi when the plane landed? But I had made a hard case, and I've never gotten around to doing it again. But anyway, there are a lot of things you can take in your pocket, in your handbag if you're a lady, or if you're a European man, the bags you carry. Sometimes you can put everything you need in that bag. And for me, it's just more fun, particularly if there's a new gemstone discovery. The first thing I want to do with any new gemstone or new source is to check what they do with my tools. And because just as the Zambian emerald had different properties than the Colombian emerald, we didn't realize how different they might be. Now we know. And now we know that there are lots of emeralds in the market that do not go red through a Chelsea filter. When I was a kid, It was called the emerald filter because the way you separated real emerald from anything else was with the Chelsea filter, and all the emeralds went red through the Chelsea filter until they didn't. Until there was a source that did not show a red reaction through the filter. So when they're new stones, it's fun to check them with the different tools, see what they'll do. And for the person who doesn't want to be a gemologist, but who just wants to know more and doesn't want to be the victim at a trade show, and you're in the trade, and very often people don't like to let people know what they do or don't know, so they don't even know what questions to ask, but they believe what they're being told, but they need to check what they're being told as well. That way you can build a base with which to know that Vince Pardeur is a good person to buy from. He's knowledgeable and he's honest. In this field, there's several types. There are those who are not knowledgeable. They're honest, but they're not knowledgeable. Well, that's not such a good combination. Good, they're honest. But unless they're buying from people who are also honest, you could buy one of their mistakes. So you've got honest but not knowledgeable. You have very knowledgeable and not honest. And then you've got very knowledgeable and honest. The only way you know what you're dealing with is to verify what you bought. And if you don't have the skill or the tools to do it, then you definitely need to know you need to go to someone who does have the skills to do it. Then you build your base on which to place your trust and confidence in someone. And if you have your own tools that are inexpensive and you know what they're going to show for the kind of gems you typically buy, then that's all you need. You don't have to be a gemologist to know more than you knew yesterday and to protect yourself in the buying and ultimately your selling situation. And what I've discovered is the more you know and the more tools you acquire and the more you check stones, the more you learn and the more fun you have. At least, and sometimes I feel like
you can find,
at the various shows, my sisters and I are the gem detectives. We're the ones where I think there was a picture taken at one of the international shows a few years ago. There were 3 pairs of legs sticking out from under a big long table that had the skirt coming down. So, and 3 pairs of legs. I confess, 1 pair of legs belonged to me, and the other 2 pairs of legs belonged to my sisters, Catherine Bonanno Patrizzi, and my sister Karen Bonanno. And the floor was carpeted with a black or almost black carpet. And we were checking a very large diamond, 10.02 carats. And it was admittedly lab grown. But he said it did not exhibit any fluorescence. I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes." I said, "May I check?" He said, "Sure." We're in a big room with lights, but there was this table and it had the black curtain coming down in front of it and the black carpet. So my 2 sisters and I go under the table with this 10.02 carat EVS diamond that, quote, showed no fluorescence. It showed no fluorescence under long wave. It showed intense yellow fluorescence under short wave. And after a couple of minutes, it also showed the growth pattern in the center. So much for they don't show fluorescence. And it was published in every magazine worldwide under characteristics. Fluorescence, none. That was wrong. So when you make this discovery and you can prove it and document it. So after our 3 pairs of legs moved away from the table, everybody else in the room wanted to see this stone. And the only place where you could have a dark environment to actually use the lamp was under the table. So people are on their hands and knees under the table looking at this 10 carat diamond. but they saw the pattern and they saw the fluorescence. And that's an exciting wow moment. And it's nice to have the tools that can give you wow moments.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, Antoinette, I got one last question for you before we wrap it up.
okay.
As someone who's written, sort of a best-selling, influential book, as someone who's written many, many books, and this is kind of coming to the theme of our whole this whole series of read and talk about gemology. Do you think that books are still relevant in the age of social media and YouTube and sharing online?
Absolutely. The reason I say that is because, number one, in a book, you can make notes as things change. In my books, particularly Gem ID Made Easy, the end of every chapter, there are blank pages. So you can make your own notes if you find something new or different or you have a question. A book isn't that big and bulky and heavy. You can take them with you. I used to have students. I had a student one year who came to my class, and she had this stack of pages, Xeroxes of pages from my books. When she would go to a show, she would Xerox the pages for the tool she was going to use during the show for that. She'd take it tool by tool. She'd use one tool, look at everything in the show with that one tool, and she'd make her notes, okay? And then the next show, she'd do a different tool, and so on. And she would write notes in her book. But she came to me at the end of my class in Tucson, and she had this thick stack of Xerox pages. And she stood there and she said, "Watch." And she went, rip, rip. And she dropped the pages, the torn up pages, in the trash can. And she said, "I don't need them anymore." And she said, "But I have the book. I keep the book because," and then she showed me the book. All the blank pages had notes about things she was finding. She never left home without the book. You can take a book with you. You don't have to make sure you have Wi-Fi and be able to access the Wi-Fi. I told you I had a problem with Wi-Fi this morning. Thankfully, we got it resolved. You don't have to be in a place that has Wi-Fi. You don't have to try to find the right site to pull up the information. You don't need to go searching for something. You just pull out the book. It's right there. It's faster. It's easier. And you can make notes. And you can take it with you anywhere you are in the world and not be dependent upon having a Wi-Fi connection. Mm-hmm. Because you have to have Wi-Fi before the social media and the online websites and all of the rest of it. And I love it. I use it all the time. But I think you still need and benefit from the books.
Okay, good answer.
You see about that? Well, I was traveling in Burma with 4 books. The Walter Schumann, that was the only book that was fitting with my Darkfield Loop in my pocket. So when I was going in the market, I was going with that and the Schumann because they have exactly the same size and they could fit in my pocket. So, and the Schumann was just about data that I could not remember.
I have the Schumann too.
Your book was too much to go to the market. So your book was at home. And I don't speak about the 2 other books, Ruby and Sapphire and the Photo Atlas of Inclusion. I can tell you, this book, they stay in your library and you don't go in Chantaburi with the Photo Atlas or with Ruby and Sapphire, especially the new one that is 4.5 kilo. No. But regarding the question, is it still important, in the social media age? Justin, I complain all the time that regularly I feel people tell me that, "Oh, Vincent, your articles are too long. I don't like to read and blah, blah, blah." So people complain about the articles that I write that are too long. So I don't even imagine if one day I write a book, it's longer than an article. So many people will complain because my book will be too long. Now, okay, people don't read anymore. Many people don't like to read anymore, but still there are few that do. And I can tell you that my opinion, in a world where nobody reads, the guy who reads some books will be in a much better situation, or will have a great advantage compared to the people who don't read anymore.
Yes, I think you're
because
absolutely
you will be able to acquire a lot of experience. And Justin, you know what I speak about with all the book about cutting that and lapidary that you are reading and
Oh yeah.
devouring and digesting and things like that. In an age where nobody is reading anymore, it will be a huge advantage to still read. So I think that books are useful, and especially book like yours, Gem ID Made Easy, because you know the difference between learning gemology with gem identification made easy and a normal, let's say, book in when you go to study gemology in a GIA or thing like that, is that most of the time in when you go to gemological school, you learn about to use a refractometer. Then you learn about how to use this instrument, this instrument, this instrument. But they are not telling you how to use the instrument together. And your book is telling about that. So it learned to play with a different instrument in order to solve your problem. And this is where it was very useful for me, because I saw many people who went to study gemology in many different schools. The main goal for them, they were studying to be able to get the diploma. They were studying in order to make sure that they get the diploma and then they have the diploma on the wall. They were not studying in order to be able to be efficient in the gem market in Chanaburi, because most of the time they had never been to the gem market in Chanaburi and they had no idea what they will do in the future.
yes, exactly.
So most of the people just go to study gemology to have the diploma. But thanks to you and your book, when I started to study gemology, I discovered that it was fun. And because of the place I studied gemology, where you had that quiz every Friday, and basically I was super happy in order to try not to lose money every Friday, because I was doing too many mistakes and I was in the losing team. I understood that I could not rely on other people in order not to lose money. So I had to be a useful member of my team and make sure that my team will win every time, so we'll not have to pay like $5 or $10 every one of us every Friday, because we were doing a lot of mistakes. So your book was very useful to save money.
Okay.
And yeah, save money, because I bought your book like $40, and every Friday I could lose $10 if I was in the losing team. So in 1 month already, your book was already pay off. So it was a very good investment just for my studies, because I saved money with your book during my studies.
Well,
And then after, when I was in the market, I was enjoying and I was able to analyze it, and I was losing. I was able not to look too stupid. And there
well,
is one thing. There is one more thing that was useful in your book that is not very often taught in many gemological school. Is you have to be humble and you have to know the limit between what you know and what you don't know. When you don't know, you don't know. And
exactly.
actually, this is the difference, like I was told by Dr. Gublin one day. What was the difference between a good and a bad gemologist? A good gemologist is not a gemologist who knows everything and things like that. A good gemologist is the person who knows when he has to say, I don't know. Period.
Exactly. And um, if we had another couple of hours, I could tell a few more stories about having to say, I
I'm
don't know.
sure you will be able to tell many more stories about.
But
We will have
but
to
the
come
but back to
in
I
person.
want to provide an incentive for you despite social media and the rest of it. I want to underscore that books are still important, and your book, when you write it, will be important. And the proof of that is after the internet really got going, and with social media and the rest of it, now, okay, Gem ID Made Easy was considered a
Done.
bestseller,
That
having
story is done. Gemadi
Gem
made it
Identification. It was
done.
considered a bestseller, but it was like maybe 50,000 copies after being in the market for quite a few years. The computer social media, it's now up to 150,000 copies in English. Okay, and
Yeah,
then their foreign rights in 9 languages.
still,
I
there is
don't know
still a
what they're
margins.
selling, but in English, 150,000 copies. You can buy it in bookstores, but you can buy it online. You can even buy, I think, Kindle edition of some of my books, so you can have my book and read it online. So the options today, when I say a book, I mean something that is also accessible online for reading. So there is a need for books and there's a need for your book, Vincent. I'm going to keep mentioning
Uh,
it.
yeah, yes and no, because your book responded to a very good idea, a simple thing that you realize that there was nothing written for somebody who had not a PhD in physics or in chemistry. So you wrote that book, Gemology made easy for people to be able, with just pocket tool, to identify most of the stone. That was a great idea and wonderful. But that book is written. Nobody needs to write another one. Your book is perfect, and I advise everybody to go to get your book. I will not write that book. Ruby and Sapphire was written by Richard Hughes. He already wrote a 3 or 4 of Ruby and Sapphire. I will not write a book on Ruby and Sapphire because he did that better than I could do. I can tell you, I'm a kind of a young guy in gemology, even if some of my friends like Justin call me the old guy. But uh, there were many great books that were written already by all the old timers. And when I look at what is remaining, what is missing, well, Justin find a good idea. He found something that was missing, so he's working on that. And me, I'm still searching, and okay, I travel to many places. I can tell you there are many people who publish already book with photograph of their travel and things like that. Why should I add one more? What it's kind of complicated to find something different,
Yeah.
something that was not written already
I think
and worth a time. I think we lost.
I think we lost her. That was okay. That was a first. Maybe she'll pop back in, but if not, I will.
I know she just moved to a new house and she had a Wi-Fi problem.
Yeah.
And okay,
Well,
she's good.
if she doesn't come back, everyone can find her on the web on Facebook. You can buy her books online. I think they're probably all on Amazon
You
as
sure you
well.
didn't get her? You didn't get her?
No, it wasn't me.
Okay.
I wouldn't do that. But
Not at all.
the one question that several people would ask is she going to be in Tucson in 2021? I wanted to ask her that, but I'm pretty sure she told us.
There will be a Tucson in 2021.
Oh, so they said there's going to be a small one. I don't think she's going to be there though, because I asked her that last week when we were prepping for this. I'm pretty sure she said no, but I don't know for sure. But we can give her a couple minutes. So I guess while we're stalling for time, Vincent, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do next month, because that's also quite exciting on our theme of those books that you took to gemology school with you.
Yeah. Well, so next month we are going to continue about that on that series about the books I took with me in Burma in order to study gemology 20 years ago. Exactly 20 years ago, I went in November 2000. So we have the pleasure to welcome between Christmas and New Year's Day, John Koivula, who wrote the Photo Atlas of Inclusion, the book that was my best companion, where in the evening I had, 1,000 of stones because the friend who helped me to organize my study in Burma was a Ruby and Sapphire and Spinel dealer. So after my gemology class, I was going to his office, and then I was able to go through all his stock with a small stone and select the stone that I like for the inclusion, for the beauty of the inclusion. And my reference was the photo atlas. So I spent 4 months, between comparing the rubies and sapphire from Burma that I had with me, and then also peridot on Garnet on other spinels and things like that, and the photo atlas. And I just love this book. That was a great companion. So I had the pleasure later to meet John Koivula, and but I never heard the story behind the book. how he started and things like that. And actually, John is just a fascinating guy. There are not many people like him in gemology. He has a really funny background. He was one of the person I think who helped to build the MacGyver series. So he was one of the advisors at this thing. So he's a kind of Renaissance guy with a lot of different type of knowledge on just when you see and when you listen to John, you realize that gemology is a connection of so many other things. And John, for me, he's an artist. He is really an artist and a guy with a great talent for observation. And I will really love to hear from his words, the story behind these books that I really loved.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've got
And
a
that will
copy
be
of
our
all
Christmas
three.
present next month. Yeah,
Yeah.
after Antoinette. And then we'll finish in January. We'll have Richard Hughes, who will tell us about the adventure behind Ruby and Sapphire.
Cool.
I was trying to get also Walter Schumann, the one who bought Gem from the World, but the interesting thing is I don't know anybody who has ever met Walter Schumann.
Yeah.
This guy sold more books than anybody in the world about gemstone. I don't have found anybody who could tell me I've met Walter Schumann. I had a discussion with him. I took a coffee. I went for dinner. I know he's German. I think that he's still alive because the German government don't say he's dead. And I think that he lives in Munich. This is the only thing I was able to get from old timers from Germany. Hey, Antoinette, you're back.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know. You disappeared. So maybe we were thinking you had a Wi-Fi problem.
Yes, I did, and obviously it wasn't totally fixed. But the guy was working on it, and I guess he got it back. But here we are.
Okay, so we just explained for the next webinar, and that would be John Coivila and then Richard Hughes. And I would have loved to discuss with Walter Schumann, but I don't know anybody who could tell me that he met Walter Schumann. The only person, the person who sold more books about gemstones than anybody else I know, but nobody met him.
Exactly. I have his book. Are you kidding? I have given his book as a gift to people.
So Antoinette,
I don't know anybody. Nobody ever met him.
Yeah. So Antoinette, the last question before we sign off, a couple people had asked this. Are you going to be in Tucson in January, February this year? Not next year?
Well, if there is a Tucson, a lot of the shows have already been canceled. At this moment, AGTA looks like it might happen, but given the new spikes in the United States now across the country with COVID, I expect to hear that the whole Tucson experience is going to be canceled in 21. In which case, let's see, there's the Scottish conference, which is usually in May. There's the Mediterranean conference, which is May or June. There's there'll be a conference somewhere where we can meet.
Okay.
Sounds like May or June. Sounds like the period where maybe the vaccination will become. Because remember, you need to get the vaccination ready, and then you need to fabricate a billion of things, and then you need to distribute, and then you need to.
It will take some time to get the distribution and the people vaccinated, apparently, in terms of the quantities. But I think come spring, early summer, we're going to see the resumption of shows. Although I read that Basel was canceled already. I don't know. I thought that was canceling it rather prematurely.
I heard that Basel moved to China. Basel moved to China will be at the end of next year in China, in Shanghai.
Ah, is that what it is? Okay.
It will not be in March, April. It will be at the end of the year in Shanghai.
So maybe I'll plan to come to that. It's been a while since I've been to Hong Kong. or that part of the world. So maybe that will be a good time for us to get together. But I do think that there's a possibility that there will be some shows in early summer. Maybe the JCK show in Las Vegas. Maybe the Mediterranean Gemological Conference, the Scottish Gemological Conference. So hopefully those will take place. And if they don't take place, then I'll be at whatever the next event is somewhere in the world, because I just love the gemological conferences and the shows. Number one, you get to see new material. You get to see material from new sources. You get to meet your buddies and your colleagues. You get to learn more from experts in specific areas. And I love the conferences. I love the shows. So I will look forward to seeing you again at one of them. And you too, Justin, somewhere in
Definitely.
2021.
Definitely. Okay, well, I think we have said our piece for this evening. We'll have to do it again sometime because I know there's way more stories than this, but maybe it'll be over dinner instead of over the webinar, hopefully.
Well, I really enjoyed it. I hope that those of you who were watching feel that it was time well spent and that perhaps you've learned something. And if you have questions, I think, is there a way that people who have questions or think of questions afterwards can submit their questions, and you could submit them to me and I could answer them or something?
I've put your website up on here and your Facebook.
Oh, okay. That's great.
The whole thing you be on YouTube. So on YouTube, people can put comments. Of course, all the racist insult type comments, I don't allow them to go there. So I have to allow the comment. So you can post your question on YouTube. But if there is any insult or any kind of stuff like that, it will not show. I'm sorry.
No
well, there's a way to send me emails from my website, or connect to me through the website. So I'll get the information sooner or later that somebody wants to ask a question or connect for some reason. And
and everybody
is it fine on Facebook with Messenger? I guess that in the future your internet will be fixed and you will get back with Messenger, correct?
I'm sorry, were you talking to me? Because I didn't hear it.
I guess that within a short while your internet will be fixed on your Messenger and you will be active again on Facebook, or?
Yes.
Maybe.
So maybe the website's the best way. If you want to ask her questions, go to the website, contact her that way.
I mean, I have no problem to this group giving my email address if you don't care. I mean, I'm happy to
this
provide.
This is going to go on YouTube, so maybe maybe they'll just find you.
I can tell you on YouTube, there is no place. When I look at the comment on my video on YouTube, I have about 20% of insult. Huh? So Facebook is nice and YouTube is wild. Huh? I tell you.
Okay, I have a Facebook account, but unfortunately, somehow there are two that we discovered. I guess I had opened a Facebook account years ago and forgotten about it, and then opened another one using my shorter name versus my full name, which includes the Bonanno. But if you Facebook connect to me, or LinkedIn connect to me, to any one of the gemology groups, hopefully we can connect that way.
Okay.
And
that's good.
I do better with email, but we can, if you connect to me via some other source, I can give you an email address and then we can connect via email. I just find it's more reliable most of the time, particularly if I don't have Wi-Fi.
Okay. Well, Antoinette, thank you so much for your time and your stories, and of course for your book. And we'll see you again sometime.
I look forward to it, and I look forward to coming up with some ideas for Vincent's book.
Good. He needs inspiration, maybe. Motivation, at least.
I need to find a good storyline. I need one reason to write the book.
I'll come up with something.
I'm working on that.
I'm going to brainstorm with some of my friends and colleagues who have been listening to this conversation today. We're going to come up with the book.
I will not write. There are so few people who go to the field to buy rough. your book is good. I don't need to write another one just for 20 people who go to Ilaka to buy or to Burma to buy rough.
No, your book is going to be about exciting experiences in the field.
No.
No, I think
Well,
so.
usually I don't speak about that. I don't like exciting experience in the field.
That's going to be such a good book. You're going to reveal it all in your book. All right.
Okay. Well,
I'm
not in Yangon. I'm not a Hollywood director.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Okay. Well, thank you,
pleasure.
Antoinette.
It's really
thank
been
you,
a pleasure. Thanks,
Vincent.
everybody.
And thank you again to all of our guests for joining us for another Sunday gemology. Thanks, guys, and see you next time.